Right. Well, we're just going to give it a couple of minutes to make sure that we really are live. In the meantime, I will, for anyone who's joining us now, thank you very much for tuning in. This is the Sifted Talks on last mile delivery, where we're hoping to sift through the reality and the hype. Last mile delivery has become an incredibly hot topic in the last year or so, as we've been at home looking for different ways of shopping, and it feels like in the last sort of 6 months or so it's become even more extreme, as we've seen a lot of venture capital money frankly being poured into these new delivery companies that are promising to bring you a bunch of bananas to your house in 15 minutes, and so on, and that's but that really isn't for me the whole story of last mile delivery. And actually what we have today, I'm so pleased because I think we have the best panel to really cover all the aspects of this. So I'm going to kind of introduce everyone quickly because everybody here has such an interesting and different perspective. And I think you'll agree that we've kind of covered the bases a lot more than just maybe getting a whole bunch of sort of quick delivery companies on here. So starting with Edith Belli from Cleveron. Cleveron is another Estonian company that makes delivery robots and sort of automated delivery systems, I guess, because there's a whole range of things that they do. So it's sort of automated kiosks that will give you your shopping that can be put in the car park of a big supermarket, something like that. But they've also launched a robot that will drive around and sort of take your parcels to you. So and they're kind of thinking about a really not just a kind of individual, one machine that will bring you your shopping, but this kind of whole integrated system for how to do this. So I hope I've done that justice, Edith, and you can maybe tell us a little bit more about it when we come to you. Then I'll go to Christina Bersa-Jones, who is, I think, again, Christina, I think it's fair to say that your job title that we put on as, I think, customer service lead at Picnic doesn't do you justice, because you've really been a sort of investor and kind of leading light in getting Picnic started. And of course, Picnic is kind of one of the really pioneering brands in this kind of online mobile app, delivery to your door, revolutionizing the way that you get groceries. That has been going, I think, already for 5 years. Is that right, Christina? And
yes.
So again, a lot of a longer pedigree than some of the kind of upstarts that we've seen in the market. So I'm really kind of interested in getting your perspective and what you've managed to learn in the last 5 years and how you see it going from here. And then we have a kind of surprise panelist who came on at the last minute, but we're really pleased to have him, Alan Hicks of Mana Drone Delivery. And so Mana, if you've been following Sifted, we've written quite a bit about Mana because it was fascinating how they've been running a trial in Ireland, sort of flying drones off the top of a big Tesco Extra, but delivering really everything by drone. So kind of all the groceries that you might get at Tesco, but also, cups of coffee, books from the local bookshop, and everything in between, which has been, kind of, again, I think was surprising in terms of the learnings from that, in terms of what people are willing to order by drone if they get the chance to. So would love to dive into that more. And then last but not least, Florian Neuhaus, who's a partner at McKinsey, who again is going to bring us that sort of industry-wide perspective here and kind of help me tie some of this together to look at the sort of the bigger trends and where this market might go. So welcome all of you. Again, if I also want to say to everyone listening, please do ask us questions. I'm going to start off the discussion with a few, but really I'd love to sort of hear what you're interested in. So please put that in the Q&A channel on this webinar, and we'll pick those up. But anyway, without further ado, because nobody wants to hear me talk for the whole time, I'm going to kick this off. And sort of, it's a bit of a cliche. I'm almost hesitant to say this, but obviously the way that we shop has changed massively in the last year and a half in pandemic times. So I don't want to kind of be too cliched about it, but what I'd like to do is push it forward a little bit, and maybe starting with you, Christina, just to tell us a little bit about just how much you've seen things change at Picnic over the last year, and then also where are we now with it? To what extent do you think that the habits that we picked up over the last year and a half will stick, and how much are you sort of investing to kind of keep that going and push things forward from here?
Yeah, no, I'd love to start. And, in a way, I guess for us at Picnic, as I think for many in the industry, the future just accelerated over the pandemic period, maybe differently from other players that have maybe tapped into what I'd call occasional online shopping for groceries. So they had many customers that would use them occasionally, but not every week or as their primary grocery shop. In the case of Picnic, most of our customers have, even before pandemic, used us on a weekly basis. So for us, it wasn't so much a surge in, let's say, demand from our existing customers because they were already shopping with us with the same frequency. But of course, the waiting lists that we have to be able to bring new customers on board, and in our case, to keep up putting the nice little self-designed electric vehicles that are optimized for grocery on the road, build fulfillment centers, because we are an end-to-end player, if you will, was a bit more the challenge. The behavior didn't change, and we don't see it changing. We in fact expect that maybe for some people for whom online grocery was new, and maybe indeed in the history of Picnic, when we started out 5 years ago, we spent more time educating people about online grocery, convincing them that it's simple, easy, and in our case, the same price as the store at no delivery cost always. So not sometimes not promotional. And that, let's say, educational message or push is no longer needed. I think people now take it as a given. And in fact, I think we're now in a great period where I guess the good will differentiate from the great, and also will have many players, much like in the offline retail market, pushing different formats and different propositions. So I think it's a great time in the industry, and we're certainly thrilled about where we are and also what's to come.
Yeah. So it sounds like your biggest problem really was just trying to keep up with the demand, which is a nice problem to have. But did it actually then accelerate your sort of investment plans? I mean, have you just had to build out much faster than maybe you would have otherwise?
I think our ambitions and certainly our plans were always ahead of what we could actually physically, let's say, build. So I think in that sense, our plans remain just as courageous as they have been. And indeed, a bit for us, the challenge is, actually building and actually finding enough, spaces to build and the time that it takes to do so. So yeah, I guess in a nutshell, if anything, maybe the penetration curves that we're drawing out sort of 5-10 years have just gotten nearer, but our plans are just as courageous as they were before. And the limitation is actually really time that it takes to do all this when you have to build it end to end.
Yeah. And you alluded to sort of the increasing competition, and I think we'll come to that in a little bit more detail, but I just wondered if you could, sort of briefly, has it made things more difficult because, there are just so many competitors now piling into the market because everybody's discovered, and they're doing it in various ways, and they may not have the same infrastructure, but lots of people can get lots of delivery drivers onto the road quite quickly, right?
Indeed. And I think from where we are, we welcome that because in a way, it just broadens the use case for online grocery in general. I think these new players cater to a slightly different need than we do. We are very much, let's say, value mass market player with a broad range as opposed to, and we optimize on value. And we are, in a way, if you will, continuing to do what we do and very confident in our offering. I think the quick commerce players are indeed replacing, I think, a lot more of the smaller shops that happen these days, more so at the grocery store.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, it's a very welcome dynamic because we actually think it broadens the awareness and preference for online grocery in general, from which we also benefit. We're certainly haven't needed to do as much advertising as they are doing. We have long wait lists of hundreds of thousands of customers in all the 3 markets in which we operate, in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in France.
Yeah.
So we're not lacking customer demand. We're just very busy building, and we welcome the party getting bigger, if you will, because I do think these are different formats, much like in offline. So I think we see our position, let's say, quite clearly differentiated from certainly the new players that have come into the market.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. Let's go into a little bit later. I'd love to come back to this sort of, I think it is kind of a long game, and having the infrastructure in place is going to be key. But I think I should sort of bring some of the others into this at the moment. So maybe going to you, Ed, like, can you just tell us a little bit about how, Cleveron then, so did you see a massive increase in sort of interest from supermarkets who were looking to, for different delivery options, and how much of that is kind of continuing now, or is it indeed even accelerating as we speak?
Yes, indeed, it is accelerating. And I think Christina mentioned the one key word, which we also experienced that beforehand. We needed to do a lot of educational pushes of explaining what is a parcel locker, why do you need one, or what is a parcel robot. So that's where most of our energy went. But today we already start off by, okay, what kind of solution do you need? Do you need a locker or do you need a robot? We don't have to explain the background of it, or what is click and collect and why should you consider it. And for us, as in terms of groceries, before COVID, there was a lot of hesitance towards should we do online groceries? Should we offer online pickup for groceries? That's gone. Now it's just a question of how do I do it efficiently? What kind of solutions do I need? And another big shift for us, which was quite surprising, but I think it's really cool, is also the SME sector, small and medium-sized companies. They are purchasing 1 or 2 lockers. So especially here in Estonia, our home base, they're establishing their own locker networks. Just one in front of every office they have across Estonia, which is very nice. So it's gone past of thinking that this is something for just big retailers or big logistic companies. But I, as a small business owner, can also have one locker. And we have cake shops, tool shops, building shops. So the variety is wide. But these are the 2 biggest shifts for us.
And it's really interesting that you mentioned that small shops are kind of coming into this, because I think there was often a feeling that this wasn't affordable for them. So, I mean, I don't know whether you can tell us anything briefly about, like, have you also been able to kind of get the efficiencies down, and maybe the costs of what you offer is now so varied that you can really serve everybody, and you don't have to be an Amazon to be able to have some kind of network?
We are constantly working to getting the prices down. But of course, the ROI depends on the company as well and what they are comparing to. So if you are just comparing the cost of a parcel robot to 3 people versus this is giving me an opportunity to establish a whole shop in an area where I don't have a shop, but I use just 1 machine and 3 parking spaces. But for SMEs also, one of the key terms is availability, being available for 24/7. So one of the coolest cases we have is a company that offers tractors and the parts for tractors. So, but like in the summer or in the spring, where the tractors are working like 24/7 and something breaks, you as a farmer, you cannot wait until the shop opens, or you need that part as quickly. So you call up the store if it's open, they put it in the locker, and you can drive at 3 a.m. when you're free to get that part. So these are kind of the availability and 24/7 availability without having to be open all the time is kind of the most important perks for SMEs.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's the sort of availability that I guess customers have become used to with some of the, again, I always use Amazon as the sort of default, big one that everyone knows. But I mean, we've become educated as consumers to sort of expect extreme convenience. But now it's nice to know that actually kind of smaller companies can kind of tap into that as well. I think I'll go to Alan now, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the sort of the Mana Aero trials. I mean, this was this was a big sort of pilot project, but again, it happened during COVID, so you were seeing, I guess, quite a good uptake. And what's the plan now in terms of what you've learned from that? Like, how much do you think it will sort of translate into people's daily lives going forward? Alan, I'm not sure if you're hearing us.
Oh, sorry, it's just come back now. It broke out there a second ago. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. I mean, yeah, from a Mana perspective, I mean, we don't really have a before the pandemic, because we were due to go live in our first operation in March 2020, and it was literally, the university that we were working to do the trial in closed. So we very quickly couldn't do that, obviously. So we ended up going to a real town in Ireland and actually providing medical deliveries and essential item deliveries. So, I mean, we don't really have a before, we just have an after. And obviously we're still in the pandemic and we've moved on to bigger towns. But I mean, I think the pandemic is definitely, like, drone delivery for us was always going to be something that is going to be successful and succeed, and something that the world needs. The pandemic has just, I think, shifted a lot of people's minds about a year ahead, which is great for drone delivery. And I think also it's also moved the regulation, and governments and Europe and the US are now looking at the regulation and seeing what people want, and are kind of driving towards getting and making drone delivery a reality. Yeah. So, I mean, for us, it's a really interesting time right now. I think the other thing is that I don't think people actually want to go back to busy streets and traffic. I mean, certainly in Dublin, a lot of the county councils and the government have widened the paving and put outside tables and chairs. And pre-pandemic, you couldn't do that because there was so much traffic on the roads. So, I mean, I don't think anybody is saying, God, I'd love when the pandemic is over so I can drive my car and sit in traffic to pick up things from the shops. I mean, I think people are just eager for to be doing better things with their time. And I think that's where last mile delivery solutions really help. Yeah.
And I mean, drones are kind of probably the most futuristic of these. So I think I'm going to just try to ask you quickly the question that I mean, a lot of people just assume it's a bit of a joke, and that, because maybe the payload that you can carry isn't so big, and so will people really be ordering sort of shopping in this way? I mean, based on this, the trials that you've run, I mean, what would you sort of say to that now?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a huge novelty factor, obviously, with drone delivery. But I mean, we've been in Galway in Ireland now for almost 10 months, flying constantly every week. We have customers ordering on an app, paying money for delivery, and it's a very seamless process. And the residents of Oranmore now take that as normal. So yes, I think everybody's first drone delivery is a novelty, but I think once they see the benefit and the ease, like it's surprising to us. Our number one item is coffee. People get their coffee in the morning, and I think particularly people working at home that would normally get out to the coffee shop, they now want the treat at home, and they want the nice cup of coffee. Yeah. Or I mean, I think it was in the tagline for this. I mean, we've had people order, broccoli and nappy cream at 7 o'clock in the evening. So it's very, very hard to predict what people will buy. But what we do know is that the service is extremely useful.
Yeah.
And I think to the point I think earlier on about, not having to be a big massive company to kind of utilize some of these technologies. I mean, we very much like the fact that we're delivering local products to local people in a futuristic way, you might call it. I mean, in the next 2 weeks, we're even going to have a menswear shop delivering some of their items by drone. So the inbound requests are coming to us all of the time because people see the value.
So if you desperately need socks at kind of 7 o'clock at night, you'll be able to get them by drone.
Yep.
I mean, it's really interesting actually, just getting the picture of the sort of ecosystem that this is, and I suspect all three of you will play in slightly different niches. I mean, you've got Picnic and what Christina's talking about, this is your value shopping, this is your every week loyal customers kind of getting their essentials. Then you've got your Edis is talking about getting tractor parts at the I mean, obviously other things as well. I mean, you do work with big supermarkets, but it's sort of that convenience and availability. And then I think the coffee example with Mana is the sort of, this is where you do want something quite quick. And so maybe to a certain extent, your, Mana is maybe competing most with those sort of 10-minute delivery, quick commerce companies, where it's all about kind of the impulse buy and the sort of, I'm having a party and I've run out of, vodka and crisps. So, get me something quickly. But look, sort of, I think maybe Florian, you can also help with giving the bigger picture here. I think that's the big question: is how much of this do you think will stick, and how much can we kind of read from what's happened in the last 18 months and project forward?
Great question, of course. So generally, I think we've seen volumes increase significantly everywhere, and we've also seen investment increase. So just kind of putting some facts to this is kind of 2014 till 19. I know that's old numbers, but investment in startups and logistics grew by 70% a year, right? So that's an annual growth rate, and that has just accelerated during 2020 and 2021 again. So I think this is getting a lot of excitement, and everybody's trying to figure out really what will the future look like. And I think there's a lot of testing going on. At the same time, I would say there is still significant demand for the basic next day product, right? So that delivery, I think, is still at the core of it for many of us, especially if you go outside of the grocery or prepared food sphere. I think in the grocery and food sphere, you have the split into I need something urgently, like the vodka and the crisps. But generally, I guess your weekly or bi-weekly shopping, I don't know, you probably plan a little more in advance rather than what I need in the next 10 minutes. So I think that question is out there, and I think it's all about finding the right spot in a step function, because delivery will be differently expensive, or the way of delivery will be differently expensive. If you go from next day, which is kind of the norm, and it depends really until when in the evening, to same day, to, I don't know, within 1 to 2 hours, within 10 minutes. And within that step function, what really is your product allowing you to do within your margin? Because customers are really sensitive to paying extra. I think there is some, I mean, they are excited probably about drones, and I'm sure for the first time everybody will pay, but in the longer term, what we usually see is that you kind of have to compensate for it in some way in your margin. And there is the question to me is really, how do you work through that, and what's your spot with your product in that step function? And where will next day just be good enough so you still make money on it, and it's more of a cost game versus I really need it within the next 10 minutes.
I think if we were looking at 10 years ago, I think people would have thought next day was nearly instant. So I mean, I think next day is popular because it's much better than weekly or fortnightly. I mean, I think if we move to a world where nearly everything is instant, I mean, people stop doing a weekly shop. They start buying fresher items quicker at a shorter range. And I think, it's up to logistics companies to make that normal and to do it at an effective cost. So people don't have to think about a weekly shop anymore.
Maybe just to kind of challenge that to some extent, 80% of parcels were delivered next day in Germany 10 years ago. Yeah. So that, I mean, in the US, I completely agree with you. I think it has gone down. I mean, it has sped up. But I do think we ran a questionnaire on how important is price to you, right? And the vast majority of customers really say price is the most important part for me. So, you give it to me for free, then faster is always better, but then you have to compensate somewhere else for it. And I think finding that spot, and I think there is a lot of stuff that will move instantly, but I think there will also be quite significant volume, like your t-shirt. Do you really need it in the next 10 minutes, or are you fine to pay 2-3 euros less to get it tomorrow? And there's actually a post-Nord study where that question is asked, and people that would rather get money back to get it within 2 days for some items than getting it next day, right? So I think there is a real balance on what you're shipping.
Yeah, no, and I think that's interesting. I think the flip side of that is, if you're online and you're shopping for a pair of runners, if you could have them in 10 minutes, you would probably be more eager to purchase them rather than say, I'll purchase them and wait 2 days. But I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a balance on what the product is and who the consumer is.
Alan, I think with Mana, you're charging sort of something like 3 to 5 euros per delivery, kind of depending a little bit on what it is. Again, have you noticed any are customers still happy to pay that, or over time do they become a bit more price sensitive and maybe wouldn't be as eager to pay?
No, and it's an interesting question, because one of the things we're looking at, like in the test, is to try and really understand the consumer behavior. So it's one of the, and we actually just did a survey recently, had a survey commissioned around the delivery fee, and the delivery fee isn't the driver or the detractor. It's all about the convenience. And particularly, as I mentioned, the coffee. I don't know how else you would get coffee delivered and keep the quality. So there are some things that just, I suppose, before very fast delivery haven't been able to be delivered effectively. So that's it. That's really the driver, is the efficiency and the speed.
Yeah, and maybe it's finding the kind of that particular niche where it sits as well. I think with restaurant food, for example, their speed is definitely of the essence, and customers are not willing to wait. But I'd love to hear from Christina as well, because Picnic has gone very specifically for this. There is no extra charge for your for the delivery. So again, so does that mean that you will always stay in a particular kind of niche of those kind of the basic goods, and that's really how you colonize that space, by making sure that the delivery costs aren't creeping in for customers?
Yeah, indeed. And maybe if I can pick up where Florian left off, we do think that the mass consumer does care about money, even if it's euro 80 or whatever incremental is to free, which is what people perceive the store to be. People notoriously don't put a value on their time and maybe even their effort. I do agree with Alan that people will always want something fast if they can have it. But at some point, limitations come in. Either that's in the selection that you can provide usefully, or then indeed in the price, because as we know, at the end of the day, on demand, whether that's by drone or something else, is less efficient than a scheduled delivery. And maybe it's not about next day. And I guess the more we bring together or bring closer the lead time between when the customer orders and when we can deliver this free, optimized, if you will, from an efficiency and cost perspective, delivery to their door, so that it always stays free. It's never more than the store, and it could well be in the same day, because that timeline gets, let's say, closer and closer to us. But we are not convinced, and I think I haven't yet seen the world in which you can provide the same selection and the same economics in an on-demand model. It something there just doesn't fit. Maybe even just that the last mile is indeed less efficient, because in our case we can do as many as 12 drops an hour. If you're a really good on-demand company and you get to 3, I think you're doing really well. And that, let's say, 4x efficiency on what is, at least until drones take that out of the equation, still a labor-intensive last mile, makes a big difference. And I think to our consumers that are mass market, price-sensitive consumers, which most are, then indeed the difference will be in whether something is consistently lowest price, which is part of our offering, as well as free delivery.
Yeah. And how many kind of items do you have for customers to choose from? I just want to emphasize that difference, because when we're talking about quick commerce, you know, we're talking about 1,000 to 2,000 items. It's quite a pared down list.
Indeed. And I think, you know, maybe to note, right, and I think this is more a comment on the industry. I think the industry in general has over-skewed and maybe driven by, let's say, advertising and CPG dynamics in the US. But let's say, I don't think anybody's convinced that you need 50,000 or 100,000 SKUs to run a proper grocery store. In fact, I think, you know, the rise of the discounters, the Aldis and the Lidls of the world have proven that number isn't that it can be far less. In our case, we also started from, let's say, the perspective of what is a good selection, not the endless sort of shelf, you know, super long tail. Mm-hmm. So when we started the business 5 years ago, we started roughly at around 4,000 SKUs. Mm-hmm. We're now at 7,000. We don't have a limit. We take suggestions from customers if they're looking for something and they can't find it. If more than 3 customers look for the same thing, we'll add it to our selection. Mm-hmm. So we sensibly continue, let's say, catering to customer demand, and we will probably hit maybe at some point 10,000, but we're not convinced that it needs to be a sort of a 50,000, 100,000 sort of selection store to make for an effective shop, because, as you know, scrolling through more items makes also the shopping less efficient. Yeah. So we balance all of these things to come up with what we think is an optimal selection. Yeah. But indeed, it's 5-6 times more than, let's say, a quick commerce company does, which is 1,000 to 2,000 items. And then the other thing that I'll note too, that you may be noticing where you are, is that indeed in a quick commerce setup where you have very little depth of stock, you're much likely to run out of it. So there's a lot more back in stock, soon unavailable items, what we consider for ourselves, let's say an empty store or empty shelf, and which we, to sort of 99.9% of the time, are able to avoid because we're able to plan with obviously depth of stock to make sure that we never run out and our store is always fully stocked.
Yeah, and I guess
I think that is the limitation a bit when you try to optimize indeed for speed.
Yeah. Now I want to jump into, because we've got some really good questions that have come in, and I might keep you on the spot, Christina, for this first one, because this is from Adyan Bunyatov. So thanks for this. It's sort of considering the fact that big players such as Tesco, you know, Albert Heijn, Lidl, Jumbo, I mean, they have really not been able to scale their, you know, sort of delivery options. In the same way. So are we expecting, you know, M&A to be a big factor? And I'd love your perspective on that. And then maybe also Florian, who looks at it from that sort of 1,000-foot view. So, I mean, do you think that, because it's true that, I mean, the delivery offering of someone like a Tesco here just is in no way compares. So first of all, there's a delivery charge, you know, you can't really book the slots very easily still. And it's kind of next day at best. So do you think they're going to have to look to operations such as, you know, Picnic to kind of combine in some way, whether that's M&A or something else?
Yeah, maybe the quick answer, and this is a bit going back to maybe my previous job where I watched this space a lot more closely. I'd say certainly all these players are and will be looking increasingly for solutions. They are in a tough bind because they do have a network of stores that they need to serve and serve well in order for those stores to continue to be efficient. For them to do online, it is a separate business almost, and I do hope that at least, let's say, this new let's say level of online grocery demand will push the entire industry to consider what is indeed the right solution for them, because I think for the stores maybe the right solution is different than if you started like we did with sort of an optimized online first solution. And I think maybe the other thing that I say is that obviously, as you know, for M&A, not only appetite for it and money is what's needed, but you also need to have targets to acquire. And I think I see that list a lot shorter than perhaps the amount of money and desire there is to acquire such players. I don't think that there'll be enough players to acquire. But more importantly, I think for those players, I'd say if I was sitting in their boardroom, more the question is what is the right solution for them, as opposed to necessarily going out and acquiring other players. But I'm sure that they'll be trying.
Yeah. Florian, you must have a sort of view on this. I mean, it's interesting because we are seeing some tie-ups. Here in the UK, Waitrose gave up its own sort of quick delivery service and then just partnered with Deliveroo. And so I'm just wondering whether we'll see more of that, but then also like going one step further. I mean, if they want to seriously become part of these quick delivery networks, maybe some acquisitions will happen. I don't know.
And building on what Christina said is really, I think they face some complexity, right? They're moving into an omni-channel world, so they now have to deal with two, and I guess their current network or their current operations are just not built to perfectly serve e-commerce yet. And I think getting there is what everybody is struggling with to some extent, or what everybody is trying to achieve right now. So I think we'll see that push more and more, but I would like to kind of split the market a little, because in groceries, you see a lot of companies doing their own deliveries, maybe partnering up with one, but it's not that you kind of send in bulk where you only have one warehouse in all of Europe and then you send it out with parcels. And I think these are two different markets. You purely think about parcels, and there are a lot of them still around. There's a lot of delivery and parcels outside of groceries still going on. There, I see less of an acquisition kind of spree for the logistics companies. One, I mean, they probably have the money now with COVID. Many of them have been doing very well. But I think for them, the challenge is that they find it probably tough to integrate it into their network. And just in the way they're set up from a workforce perspective is also very different. So I think for them, it's a little more difficult to integrate some of these kind of new services. I think for the in the grocery part, I think it would be from a structural perspective a little easier. But then I agree, how do you kind of link up the warehousing and all that kind of stuff that comes out of that? Because that's a bit of the roadblock, right? I don't think any of them is kind of fundamentally challenged by the concept of it and thinking through how's Picnic doing it. I think it's the executing that at scale while also thinking through their current network and keeping that up. I think that is a big challenge, because there's a lot of stuff at once for such big organizations, right? And a lot of change as well.
Yeah, well, maybe Ed, I don't know if you've got a perspective on this, because you're sort of you are working with a lot of the big grocers who are sort of stuck in with the kind of the big legacy stores and then coming in as a solution for them. I mean, do you get a sense when you speak to those customers, do you are you providing, what other things might they be looking at, and how much problem is it for them to kind of integrate what you're offering into their kind of back end logistics, and do they still need to change a lot there as well?
Yes, I think that exactly what Florian said, that it's not just a question of whether you have a locker or a robot up and integrating with your ITs, but it's everything that comes before that, all the supply chain, or how the work is allocated, or how the system works. And this is, if you are a huge company, it's really difficult to change something. It's even rather difficult to test something, as we see that the model is that a huge change, they take a unit 2 or 3 just to do a little test drive, kind of, to see how the model works, how it works for them, what do they need to change, and then there's a rollout. So everything that's involving the process is how to make the omni-channel work is a huge game. And this is what is proven to be very, very difficult in pivoting, just providing delivery, providing efficiency.
Yeah. Now I'm going to take another question at this point, because it's a good point here from Maurizio Campia, who's saying, we're talking just about grocery, but what about sort of medicines? I mean, we have touched on a few other things, t-shirts and tractor supplies and other things, but Maurizio says, I'm the CEO of an Italian home. Okay, now it's recently CEO of a home delivery platform of pharmaceutical products, which are close to the customer, and you can retire up to 7 to 8 orders per pickup. I don't know, I'm just wondering, again, what thoughts are for some of those other sectors. Are there other sectors that are particularly ripe for this? I guess pharmaceuticals, delivering medicines was something that kind of got a lot of publicity over during COVID, but I don't know whether is that seen as having good prospects also, or is it the case that, I wonder whether we talk about grocery so much because that's such a kind of mass daily items thing, that it's sort of easy to start from there, and if you can crack that, you can then sort of apply the same principles to lots of other things. I don't know, Edith, if you have thoughts on that. I mean, how do you work with pharmaceuticals, pharmacies, and are they using your locker solution a lot?
Yes, we have a couple of clients as well. I think from our perspective, the idea is the same, to offer convenience and when you can pick up as well. But for pharmacies, they need a special holding term. So the requirements to holding medicine, they have to be temperature controlled and such. So working on a solution for that as well. But I think when we are talking about absolute convenience, actually, I think of course, lockers are nice option for urban areas. But it's kind of cool when Alan talked about the project they're doing. So having medicine delivered by a drone, I think that would be like a perfect solution, because that's something you really may need quickly. And drone would be the perfect solution for that, if you're talking about the future.
And Alan, am I right in thinking you guys have done some medical supplies deliveries by drone, and how did that go?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, no, it went really well. I mean, we did it at the time when the older people were cocooning, so they were very delighted to get the prescriptions by drone into their front or back garden. So again, it's all about convenience, and it's all about having things there when people need it, and making it as painless as possible. I mean, who wants to go to a pharmacy and queue up with a prescription and go through all of the motions when they can just have it delivered to their front door at a reasonable cost? And I think that's the trick, is that how as an industry do we bring that cost as low as possible to make it frictionless for the customer?
Yeah, is it a big enough market? I mean, I guess there's a lot of pharmaceuticals distributed, but it just feels like it is sort of, I don't know, is there just enough volume, I guess, to make
I think it's one of many verticals. I mean, like, the way we look at it is we have a drone which is a capable drone that can carry 3 kilograms worth of payload, and what that payload is doesn't really matter. So I mean, I think, yeah, you're right, it would be very difficult, particularly in a small rural town, to have prescriptions going all day long, unless it was a particularly sick rural town. But you can supplement that with groceries, or with hot food, or coffee, or like, we've even delivered things like bicycle repair kits. Like, the list is endless as to what people can come up with, for delivery. And I think it all comes back to the convenience for the customer.
Yeah. And I'm going to slip in another question which came from Charles Foster, because this was specifically for you, Alan. He was just asking about the cost of delivery, and how much you might see that coming down if Manner's operations really scale. I mean, could it just be sort of pennies in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we've got ourselves an ambitious target to try and have the cost of delivery down to €1 over the next kind of few years. So that's our target, and we think we can achieve that at scale. But again, the efficiency comes at scale. So once we're rolled out in many towns and we're manufacturing at scale, is where the real kind of price reduction will come.
And isn't it also to do with how many drone operators you need? Because you'll need sort of some of the regulation to actually change in order for
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because at the moment you need one drone operator who's kind of pretty much got line of sight of the drone.
Exactly. So with the operation at the moment, we've got a drone operator there that is watching the drone within line of sight. So we're going to we're working within a 2-kilometer radius at the moment. But again, the regulation is really progressing both in Europe and in the US to be able to phase those people out. And I mean, the first step of that, particularly in the US, is companies are applying for permission to fly 20 drones to one pilot. So those efficiencies of scale are already on the horizon. So I mean, right now for us, it's all about being safe, getting people used to the technology, and optimizing our actual logistics flow, because we know those cost savings will come naturally over time once the regulation catches up.
Yeah. But that's really a key point. And again, going to Edith here, just thinking about the degree to which you can bring sort of autonomy to the delivery robots. I'm now thinking about the wheeled ones that go along. And again, I'm guessing that at the moment you need to have them pretty tightly supervised by a real human, so that would again not be a very cost-effective option. But how soon do you think you can kind of move to a model where it's really only sort of a handful of operators monitoring quite a large fleet, and therefore it does become cheaper?
Well, the Cleveron 701, which is a semi-autonomous vehicle, it learns the routes, but it's still teleoperated by a person. But the goal is also to have it had to be capable of one operator supervising 10 vehicles, because as it was said, efficiency comes with scale. But we are kind of waiting on two things, also legislation, because we are the only ones in Europe who can operate in a country without any limits to areas. We can drive all around the country. We've been test driving from last summer in the city of Finland in real city traffic. But still, it's a special license by Estonian government in Estonia. So even moving away from there, we can only operate on restricted areas. But there is new legislation coming in the EU, at least in 2022, next year. And we are also waiting for that. But we are planning on some pilots this year even, but it will be on restricted areas. But first one it has is the legislation needs to catch up. So even like if you need to take a breathalyzer test, but the driver needs to be at the car, but if the car doesn't have a driver, so are you breaking the rules or not? But the other one is technology, 5Gs, just waiting for the technologies to keep up. But the beauty of technology is that it's constantly evolving, so you never know what's behind the corner.
Yeah, and I guess going to get Christina's perspective on this autonomy question, but do you think, is that something that you're looking into at all for Picnic, and would that be a game changer, because you could have more trucks potentially, and driving throughout the night without having to worry about driver health and safety so much?
No, of course, it's a question that we think about, and maybe for context, for those that don't know, Picnic now more than 5 years ago, because it was more than before the company launched. The founders had been thinking about how you optimize a vehicle for grocery, which is how we started designing our first electric vehicle. We're now on version 6. We find literally every day little things that make the delivery more efficient and the vehicle better for grocery. Of course, as we do these designs, and for us, it's not only let's say the efficiency, but also the let's call it a bit the friendliness of a vehicle that enters neighborhoods, that shouldn't be as threatening as a large truck, but should be something that in a world in which we see more and more of these, becomes a welcome part of what you want to see on the road or on the sidewalk. or parked near the sidewalk. We are evolving form factor and functionality. Of course, we think about indeed a world in which at some point this becomes autonomous. But let's say in the near term, we don't see that being the mass market use case. When it starts being the case, we're the first ones on it. But for now, we are planning on what we call our very friendly runners, who are delivering to the door in a perfect uniform, and are very always young people that we train. So it's our own staff, unlike, let's say, maybe the gig working economy.
Yeah.
And we're very happy with that experience. It's let's say a very high quality delivery at the door.
Was that a deliberate choice to kind of have your delivery drivers be employees right from the start? Because I think this relates to another question that I've seen crop up, and it is that inevitable one about sort of the way that companies that rely on a gig working model, how they might be then impacted on sort of some of the changing legislation around self-employment and so on. I mean, you get to kind of sidestep that, obviously, if you're not relying on gig workers, but I wondered how much of that was a deliberate choice, and are you now looking at the way this is unfolding and feeling quite happy that you sort of went down the route that you did?
Yeah, it was always a deliberate choice, and I'd say in our model, because it's efficient, we don't need to bring efficiency out of squeezing the labor part of it, and I think the attraction of gig workers at the end of the day, primarily, I mean, there's obviously the flexibility of it and the ability to deal with peaks, but I think it is primarily a cost-driven logic. Because for us, cost optimization comes from the efficiency of our model. And we believe in a very high touch, high quality experience, certainly when you're dealing with food, certainly when you're dealing with families, which are our main customers. Then we are very happy and always have planned and continue to always plan on having our own staff that is trained specifically in the Picnic way of delivery to do this. And I can say, I think with certainty that we will never use a gig worker, because fundamentally we don't need to as much as others. Our model is already very efficient. And we gain far more through the quality of delivery than we would from squeezing that per hour labor cost.
Yeah. So where does your efficiency, like, what's the secret to the efficiency then? This is because like, I mean, you use a kind of a fairly expensive form of labor. You're not charging extra delivery costs, right? So are there kind of the optimized trucks, the vehicles, like that good? And
that's part of the answer. The other one is actually quite obvious, which is when you have a mass market offering, when your prices are as good as the store and it's always free, then you have half the street signing up for your service. So in most markets that we open, we have literally 50% of the households signing up. And in the cities where we've been now for a few years, as much as 30% of the city's households, specifically families, use us. So we become, let's say, our ability to then have density en route. Also because, as you know, we have a milkman model, if you will. So we started with a slot a day. Now we have 2 slots a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. But let's say it's all of these things combined that enable us to have very high density on a route. Yeah. And that enables us to do far more drops an hour, but also because we've optimized indeed the truck, and it doesn't take us as long to climb into some center aisle and pull out the groceries. And every second there actually counts. That's not actually useful a second. And if you follow any big truck trying to do a delivery, you'll see what I mean. It just takes them a long time to even get the groceries out of the truck.
Yeah. No, okay. So
yeah, I think it's a combination of, there's no magic formula, but it is indeed sustainably free delivery because it is very, very efficient.
Yeah. Okay. No, density. I get it. Because we've only got a few minutes left, I think, and I'm really going to apologize to people whose questions haven't been answered, but what I'd really love to do is kind of just get you to talk about what the future of this is likely to be. And again, I'll go around and then maybe finish with you, Florian, at the end to kind of give us that sort of vision. But maybe starting with Edith. I mean, you've got the autonomous cars were recently launched, but what else? I mean, what's the kind of future vision that you have for delivery systems?
We believe that there will be an ecosystem where the autonomous cars and delivery vehicles will interact with robots or lockers or the pickup points without any human interaction. But that's the further away, the future. But in the near future, it's density, as was said. But in terms of the lockers, if you want to have an efficient network, you need to have pickup points wherever people are moving. But I, as a customer, will choose the option that will be most convenient for me at that given time. So when I'm home, I will take home delivery. When I know that I'm at office, I will order something next to my office building. I will take groceries to if I have kids, I will go pick up kids from the kindergarten. There's a grocery robot. I will take the groceries from there. Anything to minimize the time I'm spending on going to the shops. But that means that you as a company need to have pickup points, not just inside your store or have home delivery, but to be able to be shared, an open network, and wherever people go, wherever your consumers are. So that will be the future.
Okay, so this kind of blanket network, and it will be, in a variety of form factors. What about you, Alan? Obviously, this is, for Mana, it's going to be, drones across Europe. But again, I mean, what do you think it will look like, realistically speaking, in 5 years, let's say? And will you be occupying a certain niche? What kind of, how frequently do you think people will be ordering via drone, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting one. I mean, I think, aside from all of the technology that we're really excited about and coming and all of that stuff, I mean, I think what's exciting for us is how we're going to see consumers change their behavior. So, I mean, I think people are going to get into a stage of maybe less planning. So they're going to get a takeaway and then suddenly decide they want dessert and just order that, and it's not a big deal. Or if somebody else comes over and we weren't expecting you for dinner, we can have your food in 3 minutes. I mean, I think we're very interested in how consumers are going to change. I mean, I think in terms of the skies, we know that drones are going to be much more popular, and in a way we see it as multiple companies working together to coordinate the airspace and make it safe and reliable for everybody, and nearly have a kind of a logistics fabric in the sky that just gets things to people extremely painlessly and conveniently.
Yeah. And Christina, your thoughts, how, again, once you've got this extreme density, but how do you think it will change sort of the way consumers will behave? Do you feel you're already fundamentally changing the way people shop, and how much further will that potentially go?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it'll be horses for courses, if you will. I think largely speaking, I think we all agree that the world moves online, and certainly home delivery will be a big part of that. I do also think that when I step outside of grocery, right, parcels may well benefit from a very nice network of automated parcel lockers that can take that at a very different price point. And I think in the end, consumers will definitely make the trade-off between, do I need it now or do I need it later? I do agree that a lot of things are now, but there are only so many things I can wish in a moment. So I also don't think that I can create my 50-some item shopping list in a moment, or that I want to do that all the time, right? So it's a task that you just do and you're done with. So indeed, I see a variety of options that I think consumers will choose depending on whether what's most important to them indeed is the speed, or is it the cost, or are we talking about grocery, or are we talking about parcels? And I do think that in the last mile, right, if I kind of, again, big picture, think about where we're going, with all of this moving online, we do know that some efficiency, I think, will be required because, simply speaking, this will all take space. Of course, if flying is involved, then I guess we have a bit more room. But somehow we're going to have to a bit, let's say, carefully adjudicate the space that we all share to get around. And I do think that can't be, or at least I don't see that will be a sort of, delivery by delivery, on demand kind of model for everything. That doesn't feel that it would fit. So I think we will need everything. We will need lockers, we will need drones, we will need electric vehicles, and probably some bikes as well, to make it all happen. But I think it's super exciting. And I think the future has just gotten a lot more interesting and closer nearby now, post-pandemic. So I think we're entering really interesting times.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, actually, that maybe what we need is some sort of meta coordination, of this on top, because rather than having sort of 15 delivery vans all turn up at outside my door throughout the day, maybe we need to bring some sort of sanity, which is a great point to if I'm sorry we're going a little bit over, but I think it would be worth hearing from Florian if you because again I think you had some thoughts on kind of just the sort of that maybe there's an element of standardization and coordination that's needed to bring into all of these last mile delivery systems now.
Yeah, so I mean, as everybody was pointing out, I think there will be space for all of these deliveries. So I think there will be a lot more diversity, and there's so much growth in the market that I think we'll need all of them, and they will be good for different products. I think if you really talk about the entire value chain, and I think that's an important aspect here, because we already talked about omnichannel, how difficult is it to actually fulfill, and what do we do about all the waste that's in here as well? Is there a way to standardize the packaging, the containerization, which will also help some of the automation and the robotics at the end, right? I mean, that's probably less so for food, picking up tomatoes and kind of, we'll see. But I think for everything that comes in a parcel, can that be the standard parcel rather than a bag or something else? I think especially as we think about automation and move in that direction, I think some form of standardization would significantly help all players and also be justified in terms of cost when we really move into such a system. So I think that could be quite exciting, maybe a few years out, but definitely, as everybody agreed, I think it's a super exciting future.
Yeah, I like that vision that it's almost doing for individual parcel delivery, kind of what happened to the shipping containers, and how that changed sort of global commerce and certainly brought costs down and made it a lot more easy to plan. Certainly, whatever you may think of globalization, the container ship, the shipping container is certainly one of those items that's always mentioned as something that really changed the world. So again, a similar revolution could happen, with the way that we move smaller quantities of stuff around. Although I don't know what you think, Florian. I mean, it's going to be really tricky to get every single retailer to kind of agree to a system like that, right?
I agreed, and I looked up what the story of the container was, and I think it really took off after the Vietnam War when the US Army used it a lot. So maybe we just need some big boom event that helps us with that.
Yeah, okay, we need a big or a really big entity to just decide to do it. Right. Okay, well, I'm conscious that we've kind of run over time, and I don't want to exhaust people's patience, so I think we'll bring it to a close there. But look, I really enjoyed that so many fun perspectives. So thank you, Florian, thank you, Edith, thank you, Alan, thank you, Christina, for sharing those thoughts so openly. I'm really sorry if you asked, I mean, there were so many good questions, I just couldn't get to all of them, but needless to say, we will probably pick up this topic repeatedly on Sifted. So hopefully either we'll do another webinar, but we'll certainly be writing about it, so do stay tuned to that. Yeah, so thank you everyone who stayed with us for over the hour.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.